2 press releases, 600 words, 1 institution. That's how the British monarchy turned a family crisis into a constitutional sprint, setting parameters, resetting expectations, and some would argue, outmaneuvering the most disruptive royal departure in a generation. Today, we're unpacking how the Crown navigated Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's exit, the rules it invoked, the levers it pulled, the risks it accepted, and what those moves reveal about power inside a 1,000-year-old system that's learned to survive storms by mastering the weather. Before we start, a question. When you strip away the headlines and the Hollywood glare, what did the palace actually do? Not the gossip, not the snark, just the strategy. Because if you scan the timeline closely, you'll see a playbook unfold in real time. Contain, codify, and continue. Did you know the institutional response began not with a punishment, but a principle? The principle that half in, half out doesn't exist in the British monarchy. You're either inside the fiduciary, ceremonial machinery, or you're not. That simple line, stated plainly, would shape every tactical move that followed. The crisis becomes a mandate. Let's rewind to January 2020. Harry and Meghan announced they're stepping back as senior royals. The dominoes fall quickly. A Sandringham summit convened by the Queen, a period of transition agreed, and, crucially, public clarity that the couple will not use his, her Royal Highness styles and will stop receiving public funds for royal duties. Those aren't just etiquette notes. They're the institutional boundary markers for status, security, and sovereignty. Here's the nuance. The palace didn't yank titles, it narrowed use, it didn't ban work, it separated it from royal duty, it didn't sever family ties, it stabilized constitutional ones. In the space of days, the Crown reframed the rift from a personal drama to a system design problem. What happens when 2 headline members decide to decouple from the operating model? The answer came in methodical steps, a 12-month review, terms that applied equally to both, and 1 non-negotiable. Working royals are accountable through public funding and duty. Private citizens are accountable through the market and the law. The palace planted its flag on that ridge and never moved. If that sounds clinical, it was, and it had to be, because the monarchy's superpower isn't charisma, it's continuity. In a crisis, continuity speaks softly, but carries the crown. Section 1.1. The fork in the road. Contain. First, the containment phase. Limit ambiguity, preserve hierarchy, protect precedent. Step 1. Define official capacity. If Harry and Meghan wouldn't perform public duties, the palace removed the working royal wrapper around them. That meant no public money for duties, no use of HRH in a professional context, and eventually, no retention of those honorary military roles that function as ceremonial bridges between crown and country. Was that personal? Maybe an impact. But in design, it was corporate governance. The monarchy is a family business in the literal sense, but its product is constitutional performance. The appearance, the ritual, the non-political center. Titles and honoraries are not accessories. They're the brand guidelines of the state. Containment ensured that the brand guidelines didn't blur for a global audience, now following every move on Netflix. Step 2. Resolve assets. Frogmore Cottage, symbolic as a British base, was ultimately surrendered. The optics were brutal. The strategy was clean. If you're not a working royal, you shouldn't occupy a scarce, publicly linked residence indefinitely. Ending that arrangement wasn't the end of a relationship, it was the end of an entitlement. The message was subtle but unmistakable. Residency follows role. Step 3. Clarify security. Protection for royals isn't private, it's state risk management. Once Harry and Meghan stepped away, the protective matrix changed. The relevant committee determined a bespoke, case-by-case approach rather than the automatic coverage attached to working roles. That sparked years of legal wrangling. It also underscored a core principle. The Crown can't be the security clearinghouse for private citizens abroad. The palace notably did not litigate in public. It let the government's process speak, and it held the line. Containment, then, wasn't punitive. It was preventative. designed to keep the royal power grid from short-circuiting under a surge of celebrity voltage. Section 2. The rulebook as shield. Codify. Next came codification. Take a bespoke crisis and translate it into workable, reusable rules. The 12-month review wasn't a PR device, it was a trial period to watch the system under stress. At the end of that period, the monarchy made the provisional rules permanent. No return to working royal status, honorary roles relinquished, patronages redistributed. That's codification, enshrining the boundary so it isn't renegotiated at every news cycle. But codification went further. The palace effectively tightened the valve on who can act on behalf of the sovereign. While Harry technically remained a counselor of state by statute, the institution signaled operational confidence in a slimmed, reliable roster, even broadening eligibility to senior working royals best placed to serve at speed. In practice, that meant the crown reduced exposure to the will they, won't they uncertainty of estranged royals, while keeping the constitutional machinery fully oiled. There's an elegant paradox here. The crown made itself less dependent on its most famous faces to become more resilient. In the short term, that risks a charisma deficit. In the long term, it defends the monarchy's core promise. The institution is bigger than any storyline about it. And then came branding, the quiet, determined weaponization of guidelines. The monarchy didn't fight a culture war, it enforced a trademark culture. The word royal, the coats of arms, the iconography, all protected under strict rules. The moment Harry and Meghan stepped outside working status, any gray area about commercial use was erased. That is governance by watermark. It turned a public fascination with titles into a private reality. Brand leverage ends where official duty ends. Did you know? The British monarchy's visual ecosystem, ciphers, crests, warrants, functions like a permission stack in software. If you have the right role, you have access to certain symbols. Lose the role, lose the access. In a platform era, that's how an ancient court survives. It behaves like an API. Section 3, Headwinds and Handbrakes, continue. Containment and codification don't guarantee reputational wins. 2021 brought an incendiary interview and a global audience. 2022 delivered a blockbuster docu-series. 2023 added a best-selling memoir. Those weren't just content drops, they were narrative airstrikes on the palace's code of silence. So how did the monarchy continue? By doubling down on the quiet work, engagements, service, and a relentless refusal to litigate the past in public. The crown's strategy here was not passive, it was disciplined. It trusted time, not Twitter. It traded the sugar rush of instant rebuttal for the slow burn of institutional reliability. Then came 2024, a year of health crises for the King and the Princess of Wales. Overnight, the public conversation pivoted from controversy to compassion, and the monarchy faced a harder test than any streaming series, a test of stamina and duty under genuine strain. The palace recalibrated schedules, stepped up substitution, and found its rhythm again. That's the continue phase in its purest form. When drama knocks, continuity answers the door. Meanwhile, the Sussexes built a parallel brand. Philanthropic, entrepreneurial, media savvy. Some projects soared, others sputtered. That's the market. And here's the strategic brilliance of the crown's posture. By keeping the Sussexes entirely outside the duty framework, the palace ensured the wins and losses of that parallel brand didn't boomerang onto the sovereign. In other words, the monarchy de-risked celebrity variance by decoupling itself from celebrity outcomes. It's not that the palace outmarketed Meghan, it outgoverned the moment by refusing to be cast as a competitor in a marketplace where it cannot, by design, compete. Section 4. The chessboard revealed maneuvers that mattered. Let's lay out the most consequential moves, the ones that made this crisis survivable. Move 1. Define the edge. Working royal was not a vibe, it was a contract. Benefits, official styles, public funding, and institutional endorsements are inseparable from duties. Break that thread, the benefits end. That's the cornerstone. Without it, everything else crumbles. Move 2. Keep the calendar sovereign. The monarchy fused the transition to a fixed runway, 12 months to test, then finalize. Not a feud measured in feelings, but a process measured in time. Deadlines calm chaos. Move 3. Redistribute the load. Honoraries and patronages move to active, reliable hands. That did 2 things at once. It denied oxygen to vacuum narratives and spread the institutional brand across steady performers who could show up tomorrow and the day after that. Move 4. Guard the seals. Visual and verbal symbols, the crown's source code, remained off limits to private ventures. This wasn't mean, it was maintenance. A monarchy that allows its insignia to free-floating commerce stops being a monarchy and starts being merch. Move 5. Reframe security as policy, not favor. By locating protection decisions within government process rather than palace discretion, the institution removed itself from a no-win PR trench and allowed independent risk governance to prevail. It's easier to critique a committee than a king, and the palace let that dynamic hold. Move 6. Flywheel momentum through purpose. Even in reduced numbers, the senior working royals maintained a beat of duty. Charity visits, investitures, state functions, soft power abroad. That drumline said, "We are working," which matters when critics say, "What do you do?" Move 7. Silence as superpower. No counter-memoir, no shadow documentary. The monarchy resisted maximalist media warfare. And paradoxically, in an age of overshare, the side that says less often sounds more credible. Surprise, in a world obsessed with disruption, one of the oldest institutions on Earth survived by being old, boundaried, procedural, boring even. That was the gambit. Section 5, the public, the pulse, and the long game. What about the audience? Support for the monarchy in Britain remains solid overall, but generationally uneven. Older Britons are more supportive than younger voters, who are split or skeptical. And views of Harry and Meghan have polarized in the UK while remaining more favorable in the US. That tug of war matters for a crown that trades in legitimacy at home and fascination abroad. Here's the kicker. The monarchy doesn't need to win every demographic battle today. It needs to remain plausible tomorrow. Institutions don't live on likes. They live on utility, on whether people believe the crown stabilizes national life, represents the state abroad, and convenes the country in ritual when politics fray. That's why the palace's post-exit playbook prioritized structure over spin. You don't future-proof a constitutional symbol by dunking on a podcast. You do it by being relentlessly, predictably there. And yet the story isn't over. Prince Harry's relationship with the family ebbs and flows, with legal chapters closing and personal ones uncertain. Could reconciliation reshape the equation? Absolutely, especially with a king managing illness and a nation that rallies to its Princess of Wales. A meeting here, an olive branch there, a shared cause. Those sparks can warm a cold narrative quickly, but from the institution's perspective, reconciliation will likely be framed as hospitality, not hierarchy. The rules won't bend, the welcome might. That's the crown's version of a hug. Section 6, the what if. Everyone wants without saying what if. Let's run the scenario people whisper about: a partial return, a special role on veteran issues, occasional representation on soft power trips. Is that compatible with the rules? Only if the terms are clear. Occasional is not ad hoc. Soft power is not self-branding. And any role would require the Sussex's work to be disentangled from commercial projects that might appear to monetize royal association. That's not punishment, it's conflict of interest hygiene. If those conditions sound strict, it's because the monarchy's service model is a trust, public, symbolic, and brittle under modern scrutiny. A more probable course? Parallel tracks that cross. The Sussexes continue their philanthropic and media ventures. The palace continues its constitutional calendar. At key moments, national mourning, major jubilees, significant charity milestones, the paths intersect. No hard reset, just small recalibrations that cool the temperature while preserving the code. There's a subtle genius to that. It satisfies the public's appetite for unity without inviting institutional whiplash. Section 7. Lessons in Power: How the Crown Played the Board. Here are the lessons leaders can lift from a royal storm. Clarity beats charisma. When crisis hits, explain the system first, the feeling second. People forgive firmness if it looks principled. Symbols are governance. Whether it's a crown, a logo, or a blue check, control of symbols protects the mission. Guard them like source code. Process is a parachute. Time-boxed reviews, redistributions, and documented criteria turn accusations into answers. We did X because Y requires it. Silence scales. In a digital pylon, measured quiet isn't weakness, it's a moat. Comment sparingly and work consistently. Continuity is a climate, not an event. The calendar, investitures, state visits, ceremonies, matters because it creates a weather pattern of normal. In storms, people navigate by constellations they recognize. Let the courts be the courts. When disputes veer into law, step back. Institutions that confuse public sentiment with legal process lose both. And a final thought: no playbook can stop pain. Families fracture, words wound. But institutions can make good choices about how private turmoil touches public trust. On that metric, the monarchy chose the long road. Conclusion: the move you didn't see. If you came for a knockout punch, you'll be disappointed. The crown didn't crush a rival, it outlasted a narrative. By drawing hard lines and soft tones, it kept the constitutional scaffolding intact while letting the market judge everything beyond it. In chess, the best move is often the quiet one: a pawn advance that closes a file, a rook repositioning that denies a square. That's what the monarchy did with the Sussex exit. It advanced just far enough to block chaos, repositioned to deny future confusion, and refused to chase every piece across the board. So where does that leave us? With a royal family that is smaller, steadier, and more procedural than its clickbait caricature. With two globally famous figures building a life outside the frame, sometimes aligning with the crown's values, sometimes not. And with a public that, despite fatigue and fascination, still turns to the institution for ceremony, stability, and, on its best days, service. You don't have to love the monarchy to learn from it. Crisis clarified its rules. Time validated its restraint. And in that balance between tradition and modernity, family and firm, the crown played the only gambit it could. It chose the game it knows how to win. If this episode surprised you, here's a thought to take with you. When the spotlight is brightest, the oldest form of power is often the one you don't notice. The power to define the terms. That's the quiet checkmate. And that's how the crown outmaneuvered the moment.